Hi, everyone. So on the podcast today, I have a very special guest. She is someone who is the co-owner of a restaurant here in Kennebunkport, Maine that is unreal. It's called Shivroza, and it is to die for. I just recently got to go. And what's interesting about the conversation that we're going to have today, and I think about this business, is that Yaz, who is here with me, Yasmine, she and her husband Kyle work together. And so this is an interesting dynamic. I think for any of us who grew up working in restaurants, maybe you were a bartender, maybe you were a server, maybe you were a hostess, you're going to relate to this episode. But I think what you don't know is the behind the scenes of what goes on. Even if you're a customer in a restaurant, you don't understand necessarily the thought, the intention, the emotion, the passion, the strategic thinking that goes into running a restaurant. And that is why I wanted to have Yaz on. I wanted her to share with you her experience of not only starting the restaurant with her husband Kyle, maybe the things that they have been through as they've been growing. They started it, heads up, in the middle of COVID, accidentally. It wasn't intentional. And just to share with you, if it's a goal or aspiration of yours to own a restaurant or own a business with your partner, this is a great episode for you. If you are somebody who dines at restaurants frequently, this is also a really great episode for you. And here's why. As I've gotten to know Yaz, I realized, like I said earlier, that there are so many details, emotion, passion. Like there's a rhyme and a reason as to why people do what they do in a restaurant. And I don't think that many restaurant patrons necessarily know what goes on behind the scenes. Like, yes, we're aware of that issue, or no, there's a reason why we have you come at this time for your restaurant reservation. There's a reason why we ask you to have a cancellation fee if you're not going to show. Like, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. So I thought, who better than to bring on Yaz? She's also, like I said, a coaching client. So we're going to talk a little bit about her experience coaching with me. But Yaz, let's get into it. Let's right off the bat, tell me a little bit about your business and why you started it.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me. This is the very first time I do something like this. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm also excited to share our experience.
Yeah.
So my husband and I had been in the restaurant industry for a very, very long time. And since we met, he was already a chef de cuisine. I was a pastry cook. We always knew it was one of our biggest goals to own our own business. Eventually, because of life, we ended up actually working together when we moved to Maine at the same restaurant. I was a pastry chef there. He was a chef de cuisine, but our goal remained the same. And we stayed there for a pretty long time, almost 6 years, and we had the opportunity to manage a lot of the restaurant. And since we knew this was our end goal, I eventually became the front of the house manager there when the position arose. So I could get some front of the house experience. So actually, front of the house is very new to me. I only worked it for 1 year before opening Shivroza, as crazy as that might sound. My husband was actually a little worried that I was gonna miss the kitchen a lot. And I have to say, I actually don't. I was really worried about it too, but I was very surprised how much I enjoyed being in contact with people, which was awesome.
Right, it's a different experience than if you're back in the kitchen.
Literally a different world. And if anything, it have actually helped the functioning of the business because I understand very well how the back of the house works. But it also makes me relay some information to the back of the house so they can understand us better. And I think that is almost like a link that makes our team work more cohesively as a team.
Because you have that experience of the back of the house.
And also us being a couple.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. If I'm a patron and I have walked into your restaurant, I have a reservation, talk to me. Give me a behind the scenes of like, how is it that, like, say for seating, for example, how is your experience being in the back of the kitchen and now running the front of the house, being the hostess, greeting, seating? How does my reservation and what time I show up, how is that impacting the back of the house, the kitchen, and also we don't even think about it, the dish staff, like the cleaning, like all that, the busing, like all that?
That is a very awesome question. So I don't think a lot of people realize it, and I think a lot of people think that when they see empty tables, you can seat them. We only actually take 12 people every 15 minutes. And
Hmm.
the reason of that is to not overwhelm the front of the house staff and to not overwhelm the kitchen. And it's not only just to take care of our staff,
Hmm.
it's also to take care of our guests. Because sure, I can flat seat the entire restaurant at the same time, but I promise you, nobody's gonna have a good time. Not the
No, it's a
guests.
shit show. Because
Yes.
let's walk through it. Okay, let's say okay, let's say you're a party, I'm a party of four, and then we've got a party of six behind us, and everybody shows up at the same time. If we all sat down and the waiter comes over and asks us what we would like to drink, and we overload the bartender, and then we overload the waiter or waitress, and then we overload the appetizer, and then it's a shit show, people. So next time I walk into a restaurant and I see an open table, you know what I'm not going to ask? Well, you're saying you can't seat me, but there's an open table right there. How many of us, raise of hands, have accidentally done that and not realized that it's because they're trying to create an incredible environment for us so that we have the best dining experience, but they're also doing it so as to not overwhelm us and their staff. Okay, that's huge.
So I can promise you, like, not only me, because I am the business owner, I think that most of the people in the hospitality industry, we are people pleasers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're actually recovering a little bit of that because sometimes we take it too far.
Just so you're aware, no one who listens to this podcast can relate to that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, ha, ha, ha. We absolutely can. That's what this podcast is about. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Because we are.
So, yeah, of course I want to seat everybody that shows up as soon as they show up. And like even the servers get stressed when they see a line out the door because they know what that means. They know people are starting to get upset. And all we want is for them to have a good time. Like, why open a restaurant if you don't want people to have a good time, you know?
Right, right.
So we never, ever, ever want to piss off people. It is the complete opposite. So a lot of times we're always trying to work all those little issues, little problems to come to our attention to always try to make a smoother experience for everybody that comes through that door.
Hmm.
And I think one of the biggest reasons of Shivroza to exist is we wanted a place where it wasn't only awesome for the guest, we wanted it to be awesome for the staff. That was one of the
Yes.
biggest motivators of opening Shivroza. We believed we could do things a little differently and take care of their staff a little differently. I honestly think the restaurant business doesn't always have the best reputation about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I am very excited to see that after the pandemic, we've actually been changing things quite a bit, not only us as owners of Shivroza, but as a whole, as an industry, things have changed drastically. And that is something that makes me super, super happy. I think this new generation of restaurant owners and even restaurants or hospitality places that have been opening for a very long time, I think they realize how incredibly important their staff is. Like it is literally your biggest asset.
Absolutely. I think you bring a couple different points. Number one, having been a bartender, cocktail waitress, hostess, you name it, I mean, we were constantly trying to, the customer was always right? We were constantly trying to please everyone. And now that I understand a little bit about the nervous system, I understand that we operate in fight or flight when we are working in a restaurant. And the patrons, those are guests, those customers, we're in excitement and joy, and we're just like there and we're happy. But you guys are like, boom, gotta get it out, going a million miles an hour, right? And I don't think that people who work in the industry do it because they love going that fast and feeling frazzled and then being told yes chef, no chef, and like that really toxic environment where we've heard and seen on like the show The Bear, but we haven't necessarily if unless we've worked in that industry, we haven't necessarily experienced it. But it's, you guys are trying to do things perfectly. You're trying to do things right. You're trying to get things on time because it has a ripple effect on not only the staff, but the customers. And I think people, you and I have talked about this privately, is that people join the restaurant industry because they truly do love it. And
And there's
yeah,
a lot of people that have joined the restaurant industry as a stepping stone, and they stay a lot longer than they plan to stay because, yeah, there's a lot of things about our job that we enjoy. We like creating connection with people. We like creating experiences, things that they'll never forget. We absolutely love that. I think there's a lot of really awesome things in the hospitality industry, but I think there's a lot of other things that you gotta be careful with. Like it's easy to fall into that perfectionism and wanting to be always perfect, but it is not sustainable and it's not healthy.
yeah.
So
I,
that is why I ended up with Katie, actually.
Why you ended up coaching with me. Well, and that brings up a good point. Let's, if you're open to talking about that a little bit. I said this to you at the beginning of the recording. For those of you who are listening, I coach Yas, so I'm not asking her questions that I know the answers to all the questions I'm about to ask. However, it's really important to me when a guest comes on, especially a coaching client, that you feel really confident and safe that you can share whatever you want, but I'm not going to pull it out of you. So, that being said, based off what you just said of really striving for perfectionism, trying to now realizing that perfectionism is not helping the business grow, nor have you feel really good about like living your life and enjoying life. And that is ultimately why you started coaching with me. Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about maybe what was going on then versus, or maybe even now, what you can see as you look back around perfectionism and how that was impacting your life?
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of times we take pride in perfectionism.
Mm,
And as a recovery perfectionist, I realize that it's not healthy and it's not good and it's not sustainable. Like Katie said, we in the restaurant industry, we're usually going really, really fast all the time, like even when the restaurant's not open. I mean, the restaurant opens at 5 o'clock and my day starts at 11 in the morning,
hmm
like from all the behind the scenes. And then with my husband, the cooks, like, I mean, even the servers that are some of the latest people to get into the building, they come in at 3:30, even though we open at 5. But just going at that pace all the time and trying to be perfect every time, because you come for dinner at a restaurant, you are saving this special occasion, it's your birthday. I understand why it's that way, but you expect it to be a certain way, perfect, fast every single time, but just living to those standards all the time, it can become like really, really exhausting. And so I was living with very high stress, having a lot of anxiety.
mm,
And I didn't even know. I mean, I could feel the anxiety, but I didn't know how dysregulated my nervous system was.
mm,
I didn't even know anything about like what's the name of the somatic exercises that
mhm,
Katie introduced me to, which is awesome because it was like very little exercises that I could accomplish in very short period of time, but it would help me immensely about how I would feel during my day and how I would react when things out of my control would happen. And that's the thing with perfectionism, you try to keep everything under control all the time, and the reality is that you can do that.
mm. You guys couldn't see it, but I pretended that a pot was boiling with water. Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. So when the pot boiled, I reached out to Katie and she helped me find those little things that could make a very big change for me and Kyle on the behind the scenes while running the restaurant. And we realized if we didn't take care of ourselves, we couldn't take care of our staff and we couldn't then take care of our guests. So for us to show up as leaders, we realized, and by saying we realized, it was almost like a magnifier when we opened the business. of all the self-care and the things that we needed to figure out personally.
Yeah.
Uh, so doing those somatic exercises, other little things, like, because when Katie started telling me this, I'm like, yeah, right. When am I going to fit this on my schedule? I
Uh-huh.
already work 12 hours a day. Like, and that is what became very, like, I wasn't able to fit it on my schedule when I tried to do other things like meditating and journaling. I was like, when do I fit all of this? Like, when
Right.
do I
That's
get
what we're
time
talking
to
about.
exercise and cook and all that? And Katie showed me that there is ways. Yeah. Sometimes she also showed me that there's ways of doing things more simply and more forgiving to yourself. I was trying to ask too much. I mean, I was living at full speed. And then on top of that, I signed up for triathlons.
Yeah.
And that was my way of taking care of myself. And I realized that that was not helping me at all. So actually, this summer is the first summer I didn't do my triathlon. I decided to go for little walks in the morning with Kyle. And Katie was like, you literally can go for a 10-minute walk and it will change your entire day. And when we were starting to see how big of an impact that had on our rest of the day, it's easier to stick to those things.
Yeah, because it's working. Because you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this makes me feel good.
And it is very like 10-minute walk and a 10-minute breath exercises is making me feel this way. That sounds great.
Right. You just brought up something that I did a podcast right before you, and the client said that one of the things that I also helped her with was helping her to simplify things and make things easier. Can you give a couple other examples of what's coming up? Because I think you're talking about like the breath work, which you do before bed, on YouTube. If you guys want, I'll link it in the show notes because it's really good. I send it to literally everybody. Um, Almost like simplifying the workouts so that you're already in anxiety and worry and perfectionism. So to jack your nervous system up and go do a triathlon or go run X amount of miles is going to feel like shit. So can we try just going for a 10-minute walk and see how you feel? What do you feel like are some of the other things that we like simplified in life for you that made things feel easier?
I think one of the biggest things for me, which was honestly something hard to accept, was to realize that a lot of the things I was struggling with, I was creating them for myself.
Ugh,
Like
I know.
learning how to ask for help. I was used to always being the person that helped everyone, but
Mm.
I didn't know how to ask for help from my staff. And most of the time, they're happy to do it. They are happy to be involved, happy to be part of it, and happy to make my life easier because we are truly a team that takes care of each other. And it's very, very silly things that I just couldn't get myself to ask for help, or even allowing myself to work from home on my office days, because I would go to the restaurant and I would get interrupted a million times on
Mhm.
other little tasks. And when I'm not there, those tasks are still getting done without me. But I am able to accomplish so much more at home when I have my, like, there's a lot behind the scenes. Like I take care of the accounting and working with the marketing team and answering all the inquiries and emails, scheduling, all of those things. But just allowing myself that freedom, it was just like life-changing for me.
Yeah, I think you're reminding me kind of big picture conversations that I've had with you, but also with other clients of like, hey, we think we need to do all these things because we
Mhm.
think that that's when it's going to create success or make us feel productive or help build our self-esteem. But I think one of the things that you're reminding me of that we did is it's not just one thing for me to go suggest a walk to you and do breath work. We have to really understand why are you operating at such a high level of stress, perfectionism, the story of like, I have to go into the office to get things done because what will people think of me, right? Like, we have to look at that. And that's what I say with all clients. We have to actually go back and look at where that came from. And I think it's really important because I think whenever we have a an aha moment, if you would, where the magnifying glass is brought up and we're like, oh shit, I've been doing that. Like, for example, like you said, I've been going into the office on my days off or on my work from home days do I really need to do that? It's like, okay, well, what is that story? Why are you doing that? Does that actually make more sense? As opposed to, I remember one day you were working from home and I don't know if a little overwhelm was coming up or something. And I said, it's really beautiful outside. Like, could you like go surfing right now? And you're like, actually, I think that's a great idea. I'm like, if I'm not mistaken, you probably finished up what you were doing, set the timer, went out, surfed, came back, did what you needed to do for work, and then go from there. And I think overall I've seen you do is just always ask questions as to like, why am I suggesting the thing that I'm suggesting to you? And then if you run into a challenge of like, hey, I don't know how to fit this in because I'm doing da 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 da, we then can look at the list and go, but do you really need to do all of those things? So I appreciate you sharing that because I think every single person listening to this right now can really resonate with that feeling of I'm overloaded with all of the things I need to get done. I don't know how I could possibly fit anything more on my plate. But ultimately, if we take stuff off your plate and it still gets done, whether you're paying someone or not, it is life changing to your connection to yourself, the connection to your husband. Like you said, I think I remember asking you one day, like, what is the thing that you and Kyle want to do every day to just feel connected? Because I remember, that's a great question to ask you. The conversation around what's it like working with your husband. If I'm not mistaken, when you first started, you guys were talking about business all the time. So it sounds like now the walks aren't necessarily, maybe sometimes can be about work, but mostly it's a time for you two to just connect. Can you share a little bit more about how you guys have with our coaching, like how have you guys changed your relationship so that it's business when it needs to be business and it's pleasure when it needs to be pleasure, so to speak?
So that was something really, really hard, especially for me. I just couldn't stop the work talk and couldn't stop my brain from working. Like literally we were going out for dinner and I'm just observing everything they're doing. So how can I implement something different at the restaurant? And I don't think that's ever gonna stop. Like I'm a very curious person and I'm always looking for ways of growing and improving and doing things differently. But I think what I was doing, it was becoming pretty toxic because we didn't have anything to talk if it wasn't the business. It got to a point where all we talked about was the business. And we realized that he was the executive chef, I'm the general manager, but we never had any meetings at the restaurant like chef general manager meeting, all our meetings would happen on our way to work during breakfast, right before going to bed.
Yeah.
So Katie helped us create that separation, and she's like, I mean, if he was not your husband, you would be having a meeting at the restaurant once a week, or what would feel supportive? So it took a little trial and error. It took a little while for us to stick to it because it was also very easy to cancel those because it was between the two of us.
I'm going to see you at home.
It's like, it's fine. I'll talk to you in the car on the ride home. But she helped us implement like looking at those things differently. Like I know he's your husband, but he's also the chef and you're the general manager. So you have to start implementing those things like he was not your husband. And it is great in so many ways that he is my husband, It honestly creates a very, very way healthier environment between the front and the back of the house. There's not that division at Shivroza, but implementing like those meetings. So now it took some practice, but instead of saying all of those work related things when we were at home, I started taking notes of things I wanted to talk to him about about work. And then I would save them for those meetings.
Yes, I remember that now. Yeah, that we put that in place. The note, just for you guys, she's just referring to like notes in her phone, or like writing it in a notebook, like anything that just, instead of like purging, I almost call it like diarrhea of the mouth. Like I used to do that on an assistant. It's like as soon as I had a thought, I would just send it. And instead it's like, oh wait, we have like a weekly meeting where we can talk about all this stuff. So I simply just gave you the advice that I had given to myself when my assistant was like, can you please stop like sending me all this stuff all the time? Just condense it. And I'm like, yes, that's great advice. And I'm glad that that's felt like really helpful. I feel like when it comes to the question, as we kind of wrap up here, of what you know now, that you didn't know then as it relates to let's do a little game. Let's start with self-care. What would you say?
Oh, I didn't know I was gonna have to put so much work into solving some personal things so I could function better at the restaurant. It
Hmm.
made me work on things that I didn't want to before.
Do you want to give an example or you don't have to?
Um, I mean, I think we've talked about many of them, but like even accepting that the perfectionism was not a good thing, like
Mm.
looking at it from a
Mm.
different angle. The people pleasing, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones that I've been working with you is setting better boundaries and being able to have difficult conversations with guests or with staff, rather than avoiding them.
Yes. I think and it's hard because there's a lot of emotion that can come up in relation to all of those. Um, that I've dealt with myself. So I'm just teaching you what I know. Okay, biggest aha moment that you've had during coaching when it comes to managing your team, your staff.
By me trying to do everything for them. I know this doesn't sound very surprising, but I was not allowing them to grow.
Mm.
And it gave the wrong message that I didn't trust them. And
Mm.
I wanted to build a culture of trust. So I was literally sabotaging myself without, like, I thought I was doing good to them. And I was sabotaging myself with what I wanted the business to be, what I believed in. And I was sabotaging them and their growth by doing that.
So honest. Thank you for saying that. Biggest aha moment when it comes to working with Kyle, your husband.
I remember when I started coaching with you, it's like, how's the communication with you? I was like, oh, it's great. We don't have like there's no problems between us. Like everything is really great. And things are really great. Like we don't really fight a lot. We're like, I love him with all my heart. But there was so many things that we needed to work on as a couple, and especially as a couple that worked together. And it has working on those scary things has only brought us more together. Like we have a deeper connection now, for sure.
On this. One thing that I think everybody wants to know if they're interested in starting a business would be the financial aspect. What do you know now about starting a business and starting a restaurant and growing it from a financial perspective that you know now, but you wish you knew then?
So we didn't have investors.
Okay.
It was just literally me and my husband.
Mhm.
And we don't come from money. We didn't have any big savings. And we literally just had to put the work in to see the banks what we had to offer and what our idea was.
Mhm.
What it really took is committing to our dream, really putting it into paper, committing and taking the leap. We actually were gonna go into business with some other restaurant business owners, but we were already managing the restaurant ourselves. So
Mhm.
we went actually to see a coach from SCORE, which I really, really recommend to everyone,
Oh
a
yeah.
business coach. And when we were talking to him, he was like, why do you guys want to go with business to someone else? Why don't you just do it yourself? And
Mm.
we're like, well, because we don't have the money. And he's like, you don't need the money. That's what banks are for. And we didn't even think a bank would give us a loan, but they did. And it was not as scary as it might seem. Um, we did have to put our house as our backup.
Sure.
Uh, but the bank did tell us, like, if you don't believe in your dream, why should I? And I think they were absolutely right.
Absolutely right.
So that was definitely a little scary, but other than that, we went all in and we actually had multiple banks want to work with us, not only one.
Wow. That's
So
incredible.
I think anyone can do it.
Last question I have for you. What is the thing that you are most proud of when it comes to the work that you've done on yourself?
Ah, I'm really proud of allowing myself to
Mm.
enjoy more outside of work without without guilt of
Yes.
not being there, of not being working all the time. Um, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of starting to trust a lot more in my team and trust that, yeah, there is going to be difficult things that happen,
Mm.
but we're going to figure them out and we're going to learn from those mistakes, right? Rather than being scared of making mistakes, now seeing them as an opportunity of growth for the team and for myself.
Love it. So good episode, Yaz. Any final thoughts before we wrap? And can you share with people how they can make a reservation or work with you if they want to come to Shivroza?
We would love that. So we would love to have you. We're in Kennebunkport. We're actually open year round. We only close the month of March. We usually go travel somewhere around the world. And but other than that, we would love to have you. We change the menu seasonally. You can make the reservation online via the website, which is shirosabistro.com, or give us a call. I'm always happy to help, or someone in my team will. And if you are someone that is looking to for a restaurant to be their next home, drop us a line. There's a way to apply on our website, and we would love to meet you.
Love it. And I can't recommend it enough. I just ate there recently and we had the best experience. And knowing a little bit about, or a lot about the behind the scenes and how much passion and drive and enthusiasm that Kyle and Yaz have for the restaurant, highly, highly recommend that you make a stop in Kennebunkport, Maine and come check them out. So, with that being said, thank you very much, everybody, for listening to this episode. Thank you, Yaz, and in health and happiness, everyone. Bye bye.